Everyone, I'd like to do a quick review of the Week 10 study questions involving Charles Hartshorne's Time, Death, and Eternal Life. Number one, in what two ways does Hartshorne say we are finite? He says we are finite in space and we are finite in time. Which is the one he is most concerned with? Time. That is the whole thing. The first part of this essay is examining. He says it's obvious that we're finite in space. That we, as physical beings, we are only part of the spatial universe. But in terms of time, the time when we exist, are we finite? Do we come to an end? Obviously, there's a fairly subtle view on this, in which he says that we are finite in terms of coming into existence. That he rejects the idea that we have always existed in some form, and so what's left is the question about, given that we do exist now, what is our prospect for the future? Just basically asking whether we will continue to exist forever now that we do exist. And that is a very sort of complicated answer that he gives. Not complicated, but subtle. Number two, Hartshorne says that the referent of George Washington and the referent of nothing are not the same. What does this prove in his opinion? I think it proves, in his opinion, that George Washington is not nothing. And if he is not nothing, then he must be something. And then the thing is to try to figure out what sort of something he actually is. Number three, do the dead still exist in Hartshorne's opinion? Well, I think there is not a straightforward answer to that. To be careful about it. Because he has this very puzzling question where he asks, what sort of something could it be that no longer exists, or when we no longer exist, what sort of something are we? Something to that effect, which indicates that he's making a distinction between something existing and something being something. So, in one answer to that question is no, the dead do not still exist. He says that, yet they are still something. So what a non-existent something would be is one of the puzzles of this essay that I think you should be thinking about. I think that we can go at it in a number of different ways, and I hope that I covered this in the videos. But one could say existence in the terms of being what we are now. You and I right now exist, and part of that is that we are part of spatio-temporal reality. We are physical beings that are in a certain time and place, and that anything that doesn't qualify as being in a certain time and place does not exist. Yet, going back to the George Washington and nothing referent idea, we can still be referred to if we no longer exist. So that we must still be something, even though we don't exist in that sense of existing in spatio-temporal reality. So do the dead still exist? No, according to Hartshorne, but they are still something. Number four, describe Hartshorne's conception of our existence after death. Of course, this is the idea of the book of one's life. That everything that we experience in life, absolutely everything, private, public, is part of the permanent record of reality. And he chooses the metaphor of the book of one's life, to describe this recorded reality. But it's important to keep in mind this is a metaphor. and that the key idea here is that that God remembers everything. God is omniscient, and we are something insofar as we are remembered by God or part of God's memory of everything. But one of the key aspects, however we characterize it, of Hartshorne's idea of the afterlife is that there's no new experiences after death. That we continue to be a something after we die, but not the same sort of something. And he has very specific reasons, and it's important to keep them in mind, to know them, for ruling out the idea of an afterlife that entails new experiences, novel experiences, because he believes that an afterlife, which is after all an eternity of new experiences, would be so different from what we are now that we could not actually assimilate all that experience. Somewhat similar to Jonas's idea, right? That the human mind has a limit on the amount of experience that can assimilate. Hartshorne's idea is that an endless stream of new experiences would entail that we were infinite beings, and we are not. We are finite, and that's essential to us, that we are finite. So I think it's important to note both that he believes there is no new experience after death and why he believes that. Finally, number five, do you find Hartshorne's account of immortality satisfying? Why or why not? That is, of course, an open-ended question, but it's something to keep in mind, because one of the things I'm really emphasizing in this section of the course with Hartshorne and Jonas is how they offer a kind of an alternative to what I call the full-blown ideas of immortality in Plato and Landsberg. Plato and Landsberg both seem to be committed to an idea of the afterlife that does entail additional, new, novel, and perhaps endless new experience, whereas Jonas and Hartshorne are offering a reduced version of that, an idea of an afterlife or a life after death or a being after death, which is not that full-blown idea. So although there's no, of course, right or wrong answer to number 5, it is an essential element of what's going on in this section of the course.